Okay, let's take a subject that is somewhat irksome or, difficult. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of misleading information. Flash options for Fuji. Now, Fuji uses a Canon pinout for TTL metering. If, however, you want to buy the Fuji branded sun pack flash that will fit on the hot shoe of the Fuji, which is rather obnoxious. This is a small little beast. You can certainly do so and do TTL flash photography. Or, if you want to do off camera, of course, the number one motto that I've said 1,000 times is you got to get your damn flash off your camera. Angle of incidence equals angle of reflection, and there's nothing more flattering than taking a boring snapshot with a direct incident light exposure on someone's face. Get the camera off the flash. You have to buy a Canon cable for that. Now this is an icon cable. When it comes to these, for example, the only thing that matters is the center pin connector. The same reason why on this expensive Cyber Commander for use with professional studio strobes, you only have a center pin. Same is the case with all of the little pocket wizards, whether it's the deluxe variety or the simple variety, the Plus X2 here. The Plus X, excuse me, you only have a center pin connector, just to trip the wireless trigger or to trip the Speedlight. Really simply, let's go over some of the options. I've actually enjoyed using the Fuji along with my Nikon, so with my Cyber Commander I'm able to control with this unit, for example, 16 different strobes. Not that I have 16 different studio strobes, but up to 16 different strobes. Also have a light meter for use for taking readings of commercial or like a group photo, for example. Incredibly handy. Works no different on this Fuji than it does on a Nikon or a Canon. Works exactly the same. Obviously that's not an option that many of you are considering. Really simple. Keep things cheap. What, for example, is a really cheap option, and they have increased in price only because I mentioned them a bunch, is like an SB22. Typically these are $20 all day long. I think I saw some a couple days ago for $20 to $23. 4 AA batteries will work in automatic mode. What is automatic mode versus TTL? People have gotten really lazy. They think that they need TTL for everything, and that's not the case. Now, there are certain needs, obviously so, for high-speed sync flash photography. So you can actually open up at 1/4000th of a second with a lot of bright daylight and be able to take flash photography, expose for your background, have the necessitated depth of field that you want for the composition at f2.8, f1.8 for example, and still have correct exposure. So you're not going to have that option with the Fuji. The flash curtains are not going to move in the manner as it does in auto FP or high-speed sync, as Nikon calls it, auto FP, so that you can actually use a speedlight with the Fuji. Now I could stick this SB910 in stroboscopic mode, repeating mode, but it's still, I can actually change the cycles and up the cycle to about 90 Hertz. Really fast. You think that that would work with the Fuji, but the curtains do not move in a manner that allows high-speed sync with the Fuji system. That option is not a possibility. So, if that's the case, people have been getting by with that, photographers, for decades now. It is certainly desirable, obviously so. I mean, a lot of people want high-speed sync for, obvious reasons, and that's understandable. Later this year, sometime in June, Fuji's going to come out, and it's going to be made by Metz. Metz quality went down a bunch in the past many years. They used to make really hardy, beefy speedlights, but Fuji's coming out with their own speedlight that's going to be designed and manufactured by Metz. I'm still not going to buy it. I don't need TTL photography. As I've told many people, and they've experienced for themselves, first time, doesn't matter how expensive the camera is, or no matter how many buttons it has on it, every camera is a stupid beast that wants to turn everything into gray sludge. I do not need TTL metering. I use everything in auto mode, which is 95% as good as TTL, and sometimes it's even better. Now, the only difference between auto mode and TTL, auto mode is essentially center-weighted metering, which quenches the flash. All of these speed lights, including this old SB22, you see that little window right there? It's actually a little light sensor right here on the front of the SB28, one of my favorite little speed lights. So it's so compact and powerful. It will basically fit in your pocket. And here it is on the front of the advanced current SB910 speed light. What that does is that actually senses the amount of light for the given lens and aperture, and specifically the ISO set that's on your camera. So there's no communication with your camera. So it can be used via cable, or it can be used completely wirelessly like I have here. I have a Pocket Wizard attached for the PC sync cable. It's being tripped by Pocket Wizard on the top of my Fuji. No difference. Auto mode. It is sensing amount of given light at a given ISO, and it is quenching right here. Typically what I'll do is I'll set the exposure value at plus 3/4 of a stop. The reason for that being is that given a situation like an indoor scenario, for example, like you're going to shoot a convention, typically you'll find a white wall or somebody standing near a white wall, and it will quench prematurely. But that's going to be an issue in TTL also. This is typically why I have it set for 3/4 of a stop over on auto mode. That way you'll get perfectly fine exposure for evenly even EV value stuff, like say a group of people wearing different colored shirts, or one person standing by themselves behind a white wall, in which case if I didn't have that 3/4 of a stop or one stop in set on my speed light, then it would underexpose because it would actually quench the flash early. So you shouldn't look down on auto mode on your Fuji, and I have no need whatsoever for using TTL flash photography. I don't have it on my expensive studio strobes, nor does anybody else. Use that in manual. And of course, you can use all these speed lights in manual mode. We actually set the power manually. But auto mode is incredibly useful and incredibly reliable, and it's certainly nothing to sneeze at. Take your speed light out, stick it in manual mode, either on cord or wirelessly, and try that for yourself. You will find exactly the very, very narrow spectrum of issues that you'll have to be able to foresee, like someone standing against a white wall. But the flash is quenched via the front window here for quenching your speed light. It's on all Nikon speed lights since 1980 something. I can't remember the exact date when they started that for auto mode. Yeah, 3/4 of a stop set, f5, ISO. ISO isn't as important as you think. And we're talking about applied gain. That only is specific as far as when it quenches the light. It doesn't matter if your Fuji is set at ISO 1600 and the ISO on the speedlight is set at 800. The only disparity is going to be the amount of exposure that the shot's going to get relative to the quench point that the flash tells itself to turn off. So if you have your ISO set at 400 on your camera and you have your ISO set at 800 on your speedlight, both of them are exposure compensation. Ultimately, there's no difference in me dialing in an additional stop here or actually changing the ISO. It's one and the same thing. Okay. Another feature that I just showed you that has been improved on the Fuji is that now, which even Sony doesn't have, you actually have a stroboscopic flash photography available in continuous high, which is where I am currently. Obviously, you don't want to be sitting there doing that like a machine gun all day long, but that is a really neat feature with the addition of the 4.3.0 firmware for Fuji that was released. 4.3.0, I think it was released somewhere in mid or late January of 2016. So all the shots come up perfectly exposed. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Neat. That's really great if you're doing any sort of photojournalistic work or sports work. Someone's coming down the field, you pre-focus or you have it continuous autofocus, and it doesn't matter how good a photographer you are, you can ask any sports photographer, any action photographer, they'll tell you that they'll do a burst and then they'll take the best form or composition that exists within that 20-shot burst or so. No big deal. So you have a lot of options without worrying about TTL photography and without worrying about high-speed sync for the Fuji. which is not a possibility. I said the curtains don't move in that fashion for you able to do high-speed sync with the Fuji. Now someone can, and I hear that they are, designing a high-speed sync option that what it does is once the flash is triggered, I know that Pocket Wizard, in communication with them, they are working on a high-speed sync option for the Fuji, and the only thing that it's actually going to do is going to actually determine when the burst occurs, and is actually going to send out the same thing that Nikon does. In Auto FP, you can't tell it when you shoot it, is actually strobing the speedlight over the entire range of the slip moving of the dual curtains on the Nikon shutter assembly. And the difference here being, even though the curtains move differently on the Fuji, Pocket Wizard is working on an adapter to mount on the top of your Fuji for use with that. Let me turn this off right now, and let me turn my speedlight off. There we go. I certainly don't need, by the way, incidentally, this expensive SC29 cable. Obviously this is overkill. This is a full matrix metering TTL cable for the Nikon Creative Light System. Don't need that. The only reason I'm actually using this now instead of this much cheaper cable, which is fine for you, is the fact that this older cable, which is no big deal, it's just a little bit of a pain in the butt. The cable actually juts out here, and obviously the cable gets in the way of the lens, so the way you're going to actually have to hold the cable when you're shooting is going to have to be something like this or another fashion so it's not draping in the front. Nikon later on figured out that, hey, the cable should come off to the side instead of out the front so it's not draping in front of the lens. But this cable is $89. This cable you can have all day long, and it does the exact same thing with the Fuji as this does, and it's made in Japan, by the way. It's very, very high quality. This is the SC17 flash cable. You can have for $15, so a whole lot less than this. If you don't mind the fact that it's actually, popping out the front. I've actually seen some people tape the cable like this, that actually stick some heavy-duty tape like that, or like this, so it's actually not hanging in front of the lens like it is right now. Bit of a design error on the part of Nikon many ages ago. This cable isn't made anymore, but it's incredibly durable, and it's really damn cheap. The option that I like the most, and perfect for street photography, and here in the future I'm going to show you a different wireless transceiver for mounting. This is a pair of Pocket Wizards. For mounting on the top of your Fuji, they're a lot smaller, they're about the size of a dice cube. But right now I have a Plus X transceiver set from Pocket Wizard on top of my unit, and let me turn it on over here. And it's my favorite little speed light for using on my Fuji. So I have complete wireless options over here. I can get this and stick it wherever I want. I'll show you something else in a second here. You can also do wireless. I forgot that I had in continuous high. You can also do wireless continuous burst like that, which is absolutely incredible. Say, for example, like this. That is amazing. On this little system, that makes it a perfect street photojournalistic tool, or for lovely. Every shot gets exposed perfectly. Let me turn this off right now, and my camera off. Let me show you something else that I love to do, and that's the reason why I love these cheap little units so much, like the SP22. It's very lightweight. Turn that off. I'll use these little mini tripods. I'll attach, like I have on my SP28. These are a little bit too big. These are nice and small. What I use is a cold shoe to tripod adapter, and it's about $2 on top of one of these little miniature tripods. And then what I'll do is I'll lock that into place. I'll have this attached to this, which I'm not going to do right now. I'll plop this down, say here, the person I'm shooting, I'll plop it down over here or wherever I want, stick a gel over in front of it, or a diffuser. I'll have my wireless trigger. Grab that off. You can actually cause a short or a problem in your camera if you have one of these on while you actually pop it on the hot shoe of your Fuji. Plop it over here, take shots, not this close. Wherever you need it to be. You can have one behind the person, wireless trigger for there, or wireless trigger for instant illumination, to get the correct exposure that you want. Like I said, another one behind them, or behind them pointing up at them, or one sitting on top of a light stand pointing at the back of their hair for hair illumination. You have a lot of options with the Fuji, and I don't give a damn. You know, I do have use, you know, here and there for a high-speed sync. That's understandable. As far as me needing TTL flash photography on this Fuji system, I absolutely don't need it at all. People have basically forgotten what auto mode is. I mean, there's auto mode on the current latest Nikon SB910 Speedlight, which is $550, and the same is going to be true for the unit that was just announced that's going to replace it. The reason you want to buy a Nikon also is that auto mode on a Nikon works a lot better than auto mode on other speedlights. These are the people that can't stand Nikon. They're just like hardcore Canon people, or they're hardcore whatever. They buy Nikon speedlights for a reason, because these live the longest, they're the best made, and they're the most reliable. So no matter what you hate Nikon, love Nikon, doesn't make any difference. Get Nikon speedlights. This is an SB28. It's my favorite one. Very powerful, very compact. But even little cheap jobbies like this, for $40. If you want a creative system, flash photography for your Fuji, you know, a $15 SC17 cable and a $20 typically SB22 Nikon Speedlight, you know, this has 4 different auto modes on it as well. It uses the same sort of light sensing quench system on the front, and you have 4 different auto mode switches back here. I mean, there's nothing back here to look at. I mean, you just got a switch, but it still uses auto mode, and it still will work perfectly fine in auto mode either via cord or wirelessly. But you're talking about $40. You have to spend more money for wireless triggers, of course, but for $40, you know, you could have the moon with your Fuji. That's the SC17 cable and this Nikon SB22 Speedlight here. $40 is quite a lot, and that's not counting the 4 AA batteries that you're going to need, obviously. But you know, these are really the options with your Fuji, and you don't hear me complaining about anything. I said people that complain that they need TTL, I have to say it, but they're D-bags and pusses, and you don't need it. You don't have it on most expensive studio strobes, and you also don't need TTL photography for street work or anything else, but you do have that option. If you want to buy a Canon cable and the Fuji branded Sunpack Speedlight for TTL flash photography, that is also an option. I think that in total will run you about $120, which isn't that much. It sure beats the hell out of spending $550 on an SB910, right? You're still not going to get TTL photography. I'm not recommending purchasing something this expensive for the Fuji. I just happen to have a few of them and was using it, so. But anyway, these are some of the many options. These are basically most of the many options, actually, that you can use with your Fuji. And thanks for watching. If you like this video, drop me a buck or two, or tell me to jump off a cliff. Whatever makes you happy, whatever tickles your pickle. Catch you later.